Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. I am very happy to see you, of course. Thanks for joining me for another of my projected to be interminable reading streams. I'm putting the PayPal link in the pinned comment. Of course, if you have been around, you know. I turn off the monetization so that ad breaks will not interrupt these reading streams. I hate to have an ad interrupt while I'm trying to fall asleep while somebody's reading. Let me do one more thing here. And as I threatened to do, take some more Crano before I go live. It's a hard knock life, but it could be a lot harder. Welcome back. Sorry I'm coming in so late. But here I am now. Let's see what we can do about reading the rest of this brief novel, A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin, which I encourage you to buy a copy of yourself. I'm going to back up to the page before, actually. If you've been in here, you know Ged, the young wizard, is pursuing the demonic extra-dimensional shadow being that has been tormenting him since he accidentally set it loose when he was in school. I'm in the middle of a chapter, actually. The chapter I'm in the middle of is called Hunting. I bugged out at a random time last night. It's the middle of chapter 8. Yes. The boat creaked, the waves lisped, the wind hissed a little on the white sail. The moments went by. Still Ged waited, one hand on the yew-wood mast of his boat, staring into the icy drizzle that slowly drove in ragged lines across the sea from the north. The moments went by. Then, far off in the rain over the water, he saw the shadow coming. It had done with the body of the Oscillian oarsman Skior, and not as Gebeth did it follow him through the winds and over sea. Nor did it wear that beast shape in which he had seen it on Roke Knoll and in his dreams. Yet it had a shape now, even in the daylight. In its pursuit of Ged and in its struggle with him on the moors, it had drawn power from him, sucking it into itself, and it may be that his summoning of it aloud in the light of day had given to it or forced upon it some form and semblance. Certainly it had now some likeness to a man, though being shadow it cast no shadow. So it came over the sea, out of the jaws of Enlad towards Gaunt, a dim, ill-made thing pacing uneasy on the waves, peering down the wind as it came, and the cold rain blew through it. Because it was half-blinded by the day, and because he had called it, Ged saw it before it saw him. He knew it as it knew him, among all beings, all shadows. In the terrible solitude of the winter sea, Ged stood and saw the thing he feared. The wind seemed to blow it farther from the boat, and the waves ran under it, bewildering his eye, and ever and again it seemed closer to him. He could not tell if it moved or not. It had seen him now, though there was nothing in his mind but horror and fear of its touch. The cold, black pain that drained his life away, yet he waited, unmoving. Then, all at once, speaking loud, he called the mage wind strong and sudden into his white sail, and his boat leaped across the gray waves straight at the lowering thing that hung upon the wind. In utter silence, the shadow, wavering, turned and fled. Upwind it went, northward. Upwind Ged's boat followed, shadow speed against mage craft, the rainy gale against them both. And the young man yelled to his boat, to the sail and the wind and the waves ahead, as a hunter yells to his hounds when the wolf runs in plain sight before them. And he brought into that spell-woven sail a wind that would have split any sail of cloth, and that drove his boat over the sea like a scud of blown foam, closer always to the thing that fled. Now the shadow turned, making a half circle, and appearing all at once more loose and dim, less like a man, more like mere smoke blowing on the wind. It doubled back and ran downwind with the gale, as if it made for Gaunt. With hand and spell, Ged turned his boat, and it leaped like a dolphin from the water, rolling in that quick turn. Faster than before he followed, but the shadow grew ever fainter to his eyes. Rain, mixed with sleet and snow, came stinging across his back and his left cheek, and he could not see more than 100 yards ahead. Before long, as the storm grew heavier, the shadow was lost to sight. Yet Ged was sure of its track as if he followed a beast's track over snow instead of a wraith fleeing over water. Though the wind blew his way now, he held the singing mage wind in the sail, and flake foam shot from the boat's blunt prow, and she slapped the water as she went. For a long time Hunted and Hunter held their weird fleet course, and the day was darkening fast. Ged knew that at the great pace he had gone these past hours, he must be south of Gaunt, heading past it towards Spivey or Torhaven, or even past these islands out into the open reach. He could not tell. He did not care. He hunted, he followed, and fear ran before him. All at once he saw the shadow for a moment not far from him. The world's wind had been sinking, and the driving sleet of the storm had given way to a chill, ragged, thickening mist. Through this mist he glimpsed the shadow, fleeing somewhat to the right of his course. He spoke to wind and sail and turned the tiller and pursued, though again it was a blind pursuit. The fog thickened fast, boiling and tattering where it met with the spell wind, closing down all round the boat, a featureless pallor that deadened light and sight. Even as Ged spoke the first word of a clearing charm, he saw the shadow again, still to the right of his course, but very near, and going slowly. The fog blew through the faceless vagueness of its head, yet it was shaped like a man, only deformed and changing, like a man's shadow. Ged veered the boat once more, thinking he had run his enemy to ground. In that instant it vanished, and it was his boat that ran aground, smashing up on shoal rocks that the blowing mist had hidden from his sight. He was pitched nearly out, but grabbed hold on the mast staff before the next breaker struck. This was a great wave, which threw the little boat up out of the water and brought her down on a rock, as a man might lift up and crush a snail's shell. Stout and wizardly was the staff Ogion had shaped. It did not break, and buoyant as a dry log it rode the water. Still grasping it, Ged was pulled back as the breakers streamed back from the shoal, so that he was in deep water and saved till the next wave from battering on the rocks. Salt-blinded and choked, he tried to keep his head up and to fight the enormous pull of the sea. There was sand beach a little aside of the rocks. He glimpsed this a couple of times as he tried to swim free of the rising of the next breaker. With all his strength and with the staff's power aiding him, he struggled to make for that beach. He got no nearer. The surge and recoil of the swells tossed him back and forth like a rag, and the cold of the deep sea drew warmth fast from his body, weakening him till he could not move his arms. He had lost sight of rocks and beach alike, and did not know what way he faced. There was only a tumult of water around him, under him, over him, blinding him, strangling him, drowning him. A wave swelling in under the ragged fog took him and rolled him over and flung him up like a stick of driftwood on the sand. There he lay. He still clutched the yew-wood staff with both hands. Lesser waves dragged at him, trying to tug him back down the sand in their outgoing rush, and the mist parted and closed above him, and later a sleety rain beat on him. After a long time he moved. He got up on hands and knees and began slowly crawling up the beach away from the water's edge. It was black night now, but he whispered to the staff, and a little weir-light clung about it. With this to guide him, he struggled forward, little by little, up toward the dunes. He was so beaten and broken and cold that this crawling through the wet sand in the whistling, sea-thundering dark was the hardest thing he had ever had to do. And once or twice it seemed to him that the great noise of the sea and the wind all died away, and the wet sand turned to dust under his hands, and he felt the unmoving gaze of strange stars on his back. But he did not lift his head, and he crawled on, and after a while he heard his own gasping breath and felt the bitter wind beat the rain against his face. A.J. Mead, The Infinity Concerto by Greg Bear. I read Blood Music when it came out. Isn't that Greg Bear? I think. Am I remembering that right? It's a long time ago. I was like 13 or 14 when that book came out. Thanks for the recommendation. Glad to see you in here. Nice to see you. The moving brought a little warmth back into him at last, and after he had crept up into the dunes, where the gusts of rainy wind came less hard, he managed to get up on his feet. Um, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to read next, actually. I'm going to do some short stories for a few days for sure. I have that collection of classic horror stories, Foundations of Fear. I haven't finished that. There's probably 5 more nights of reading in that. And I've gone through a couple of other collections of science fiction and horror short stories. Um, I don't have a huge, deep bench there, though. Yeah, I have, I think, 3 collections of David Hartwell's best of science fiction of the year from the 90s. And there's 3 more of those at the used bookstore that I went to the other day. And I have 2 of David Hartwell's big science fiction collections, The World Treasury here, and it's a really beat up copy of it. Where is it? I also have this anthology, this Norton anthology of classic short fiction, which is all like famous stories by like Poe and Faulkner and Steinbeck and stuff like that. But like, I'm sure it's full of really good stuff. I just haven't looked through it yet. Got to start using your library card. Yeah, I mean, I need to get a library card. Like, I don't have a stable address here yet, so I can't get a library card here yet. But yeah, there's a pretty good library in Hattiesburg. Soon I will be able to get hold of any book I want. And New York's library, A.J. Mead. Do you know the book? Have you read From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basiley Frankweiler? It's a young adult book that has gone out of fashion now, I think. It was written in, I think, the 60s. But it's about 2 kids, like little kids. I think the girl is like 11 and her little brother is like 9. And they decide to run away from home and live in the library in New York. Like, she worked it out like a heist movie. It actually like documents how the children managed to infiltrate the library, how they managed to avoid the guard, where they sleep, all that stuff. The novel A.J. Mead is called From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. I can't remember the name of the author. It's a woman's name. If you look up Mixed Up Files, you'll find it. It was really popular in the 60s and 70s, A.J. Mead. You might have read it. It's pitched at a 3rd or 4th grade level, so you might have forgotten it. And there's a movie of it. Did they also sleep in a museum? Am I confused and it's not the library and it's a museum? I don't think so. I think that's a different story. Pretty sure it's the library that they sleep in. And there's a movie version from the late 70s called, I think, The Runaways, like the band, that had the older woman they end up washing up at her house, who's the Mrs. Basiley Frankweiler of the title. She just appears at the end, like she gives them tea and calls their parents. But in the movie, it's Lauren Bacall. I'm pretty sure. It might be another famous actress who is getting elderly, but I think it's Lauren Bacall coming out of retirement to play Mrs. Basiley Frankweiler. I definitely read a book where 2 siblings hide in the Museum of Natural History. I'm trying to, it's been so long since I read the book or saw the movie that I really don't remember details of what they do in the place they run away to. I do remember, it could have been a ripoff. Yeah, it's a really popular book. There's also Night at the Museum, but isn't that was a popular children's book before it was a movie too, but isn't it like he's the night guard and the toys and stuff come to life, like the exhibits come to life? Toys, that's a different one too. Yeah, I saw Night at the Museum when it came out. Actually, I reviewed it for a newspaper when it came out. You were probably a child when it came out. Only thing I remember is the Star Wars figures coming to life. Is the only thing I remember. I think it's Ben Stiller in that movie. I'm never going to finish reading this book tonight. Night at the Museum. Yeah. Yeah, you were like 12. I think I was like 30 when that came out. I reviewed it for a newspaper. I don't remember what year it was, though. Robin Williams, right. Yeah. I do remember that it was a big hit in part because there wasn't anything else like that playing. Like I ended up having to review it and give it a fairly positive review because there just weren't any other family fantasy. Like I was doing a fantasy column for SF Review and only reviewing science fiction and fantasy movies, and there were just no other children's movies within like a month of that. So like that's part of the reason that was enough of a hit to get a sequel. I think Melissa Matheson wrote the script for that, who wrote E.T. Oh my God, I can't believe I remember that. Because I was like, what? Like, this is what you got? You wrote E.T., lady. It's probably better than I remember it being. I'm sure you liked it if you're a kid. All right, I'm going to get back to reading. The moving brought a little warmth back into him at last. And after he had crept up into the dunes where the gusts of rainy wind came less hard, he managed to get up on his feet. He spoke a stronger light out of the staff, for the world was utterly black, and then, leaning on the staff, he went on, stumbling and halting, half a mile or so inland. Then, on the rise of a dune, he heard the sea, louder again, not behind him, but in front. The dune sloped down again to another shore. This was no island he was on, but a mere reef, a bit of sand in the midst of the ocean. He was too worn out to despair, but he gave a kind of sob and stood there bewildered, leaning on his staff for a long time. Then, doggedly, he turned to the left, so the wind would be at his back at least, and shuffled down the high dune, seeking some hollow among the ice-rimed, bowing seagrass, where he could have a little shelter. As he held up the staff to see what lay before him, he caught a dull gleam at the farthest edge of the circle of weirlight, a wall of rain-wet wood. It was a hut or shed, small and rickety as if a child had built it. Ged knocked on the low door with his staff. It remained shut. Ged pushed it open and entered, stooping nearly double to do so. He could not stand up straight inside the hut. Coals lay red in the fire pit, and by their dim glow Ged saw a man with white, long hair, who crouched in terror against the far wall, and another, man or woman he could not tell, peering from a heap of rags or hides on the floor. "I won't hurt you," Ged whispered. They said nothing. He looked from one to the other. Their eyes were blank with terror. When he laid down his staff, the one under the pile of rags hid, whimpering. Ged took off his cloak that was heavy with water and ice, stripped naked and huddled over the fire pit. "Give me something to wrap myself in," he said. He was hoarse and could hardly speak for the chattering of his teeth and the long shudders that shook him. If they heard him, neither of the old ones answered. He reached out and took a rag from the bed heap, a goat hide. It might have been years ago, but it was now all tatters and black grease. The one under the bed heap moaned with fear, but Ged paid no heed. He rubbed himself dry and then whispered, "Have you wood? Build up the fire a little, old man. I come to you in need. I mean you no harm." AJ, you're welcome to sidetrack and distract me. I try not to get distracted too much while I do the reading streams, but only within reason. I'm not going to ignore chat, that's for sure. So there's no point in doing it live if I'm going to ignore chat. The old man did not move, watching him in a stupor of fear. "Do you understand me? Do you speak no Hardic?" Ged paused and then asked, "Kargad?" At that word, the old man nodded all at once, one nod, like a sad old puppet on strings. But as it was the only word Ged knew of the Kargish language, it was the end of their conversation. He found wood piled by one wall, built up the fire himself, and then with gestures asked for water, for swallowing seawater had sickened him, and now he was parched with thirst. Cringing, the old man pointed to a great shell that held water, and pushed towards the fire another shell in which were strips of smoke-dried fish. So, cross-legged, close by the fire, Ged drank and ate a little, and as some strength and sense began to come back into him, he wondered where he was. Even with the mage wind, he could not have sailed clear to the Kargad lands. This islet must be out in the reach, east of Gaunt, but still west of Cargo At. It seemed strange that people dwelt on so small and forlorn a place, a mere sandbar. Maybe they were castaways, but he was too weary to puzzle his head about them then. He kept turning his cloak to the heat. The silvery Palawi fur dried fast, and as soon as the wool of the facing was at least warm, if not dry, He wrapped himself in it and stretched out by the fire pit. "Go to sleep, poor folk," he said to his silent hosts, and laid his head down on the floor of sand and slept. 3 nights he spent on the nameless isle, for the first morning when he woke he was sore in every muscle and feverish and sick. He lay like a log of driftwood in the hut by the fire pit all that day and night. The next morning he woke still stiff and sore, but recovered. He put back on his salt-crusted clothes, for there was not enough water to wash them, and going out into the gray, windy morning, looked over this place whereto the shadow had tricked him. It was a rocky sandbar a mile wide at its widest and a little longer than that, fringed all about with shoals and rocks. No tree or bush grew on it, no plant but the bowing sea grass. The hut stood in a hollow of the dunes, and the old man and woman lived there alone in the utter desolation of the empty sea. The hut was built, or piled up rather, of driftwood planks and branches. Their water came from a little brackish well beside the hut. Their food was fish and shellfish, fresh or dried, and rockweed. The tattered hides in the hut and a little store of bone needles and fish hooks, and the sinew for fish lines and fire drill, came not from goats as Ged had thought at first, but from spotted seal. And indeed this was the kind of place where the seal will go to raise their pups in summer. But no one else comes to such a place. The old ones feared Ged not because they thought him a spirit, and not because he was a wizard, but only because he was a man. They had forgotten that there were other people in the world. The old man's sullen dread never lessened. When he thought Ged was coming close enough to touch him, he would hobble away, peering back with a scowl around his bush of dirty white hair. At first the old woman had whimpered and hidden under her rag pile whenever Ged moved, but as he had lain dozing feverishly in the dark hut, he saw her squatting to stare at him with a strange, dull, yearning look, and after a while she had brought him water to drink. When he sat up to take the shell from her, she was scared and dropped it, spilling all the water, and then she wept and wiped her eyes with her long whitish gray hair. Now she watched him as he worked down on the beach, shaping driftwood and planks from his boat that had washed ashore into a new boat, using the old man's crude stone adze and a binding spell. This was neither a repair nor a boat building, for he had not enough proper wood, and must supply all his wants with pure wizardry. Yet the old woman did not watch his marvelous work so much as she watched him, with that same craving look in her eyes. After a while she went off, and came back presently with a gift, a handful of mussels she had gathered on the rocks. Ged ate them as she gave them to him, sea-wet and raw, and thanked her. Seeming to gain courage, she went to the hut and came back with something again in her hands, a bundle wrapped up in a rag. Timidly, watching his face all the while, she unwrapped the thing and held it up for him to see. It was a little child's dress of silk brocade, stiff with seed pearls, stained with salt, yellow with years. On the small bodice the pearls were worked in a shape Ged knew, the double arrow of the god brothers of the Kargad Empire, surmounted by a king's crown. The old woman, wrinkled, dirty, clothed in an ill-sewn sack of sealskin, pointed at the little silken dress and at herself, and smiled, a sweet, unmeaning smile, like a baby's. From some hiding place sewn in the skirt of the dress she took a small object, and this was held out to Ged. It was a bit of dark metal, a piece of broken jewelry, perhaps, the half-circle of a broken ring. Ged looked at it, but she gestured that he take it, and was not satisfied until he took it. Then she nodded and smiled again. She had made him a present. But the dress she wrapped up carefully in its greasy rag coverings, and she shuffled back to the hut to hide the lovely thing away. Ged put the broken ring into his tunic pocket with almost the same care, for his heart was full of pity. He guessed now that these two might be children of some royal house of the Kargad Empire, a tyrant or usurper who feared to shed kingly blood, had sent them to be cast away to live or die on an uncharted islet far from Karago-At. One had been a boy of 8 or 10, maybe, and the other a stout baby princess in a dress of silk and pearls, and they had lived, and lived on alone, 40 years, 50 years, on a rock in the ocean, prince and princess of desolation. But the truth of this guess he did not learn until years later the quest of the ring of Erith Akbi led him to the Kargad lands and to the tombs of Atuan. The sequel's called The Tombs of Atuan, so I guess that's setting that up. I haven't read that since I was a kid. His third night on the isle lightened to a calm, pale sunrise. It was the day of sun return, the shortest day of the year. His little boat of wood and magic, scraps and spells, was ready. He had tried to tell the old ones that he would take them to any land, Gaunt or Spivey or the Toracles. He would have left them even on some lonely shore of Cargo At had they asked of him, though Cargish waters were no safe place for an archipelagan to venture. But they would not leave their barren isle. The old woman seemed not to understand what he meant with his gestures and quiet words. The old man did understand, and refused. All his memory of other lands and other men was a child's nightmare of blood and giants and screaming. Ged could see that in his face as he shook his head and shook his head. So Ged that morning filled up a sealskin pouch with water at the well, and since he could not thank the old ones for their fire and food, and had no present for the old woman as he would have liked, he did what he could, and set a charm on that salty, unreliable spring. The water rose up through the sand as sweet and clear as any mountain spring in the heights of Gaunt, nor did it ever fail. Because of it, that place of dunes and rocks is charted now and bears a name. Sailors call it Springwater Isle. But the hut is gone, and the storms of many winters have left no sign of the two who lived out their lives there and died alone. They kept hidden in the hut as if they feared to watch when Ged ran his boat out from the sandy south end of the isle. He let the world's wind, steady from the north, fill his sail of spellcloth, and went speedily forth over the sea. Now this sea quest of Ged's was a strange matter, for as he well knew, he was a hunter who neither knew what the thing was that he hunted, nor where in all Earthsea it might be. He must hunt it by guess, by hunch, by luck, even as it had hunted him. Each was blind to the other's being, Ged as baffled by impalpable shadows as the shadow was baffled by daylight and by solid things. One certainty only Ged had, that he was indeed the hunter now and not the hunted. For the shadow, having tricked him onto the rocks, might have had him at its mercy all the while he lay half dead on the shore and blundered in darkness in the stormy dunes. But it had not waited for that chance. It had tricked him and fled away at once, not daring now to face him. In this he saw that Ogion had been right. The shadow could not draw on his power so long as he was turned against it. So he must keep against it, keep after it, though its track was cold across these wide seas, and he had nothing at all to guide him but the luck of the world's wind blowing southward, and a dim guess or notion in his mind that south or east was the right way to follow. Before nightfall he saw away off on his left hand the long, faint shoreline of a great land, which must be Cargo At. He was in the very sea roads of those white, barbaric folk. He kept a sharp watch out for any Cargish longship or galley, and he remembered, as he sailed through red evening, that morning of his boyhood in Ten Alders village, the plumed warriors, the fire, the mist. And thinking of that day, he saw all at once with a qualm at his heart how the shadow had tricked him with his own trick, bringing that mist about him on the sea as if bringing it out of his own past, blinding him to danger and fooling him to his death. He kept his course to the southeast, and the land sank out of sight as night came over the eastern edge of the world. The hollows of the waves all were full of darkness, while the crests shone yet with a clear, ruddy reflection of the west. Ged sang aloud the winter carol, and such cantos of the deed of the young king as he remembered, for those songs are sung at the festival of sun return. His voice was clear, yet it fell to nothing in the vast silence of the sea. Darkness came quickly, and the winter stars. All that longest night of the year he waked, watching the stars rise upon his left hand and wheel overhead and sink into far black waters on the right, while always the long wind of winter bore him southward over an unseen sea. He could sleep only for a moment now and then with a sharp awakening. This boat he sailed was in truth no boat, but a thing more than half charm and sorcery, and the rest of it mere planks and driftwood, which, if he let slack the shaping spells and the binding spell upon them, would soon enough lapse and scatter and go drifting off as a little flotsam on the waves. The sail, too, woven of magic and the air, would not long stay against the wind if he slept, but would turn to a puff of wind itself. Ged's spells were cogent and potent, but when the matter on which such spells works is small, the power that keeps them working must be renewed from moment to moment. So he slept not that night. He would have gone easier and swifter as falcon or dolphin, but Ogion had advised him not to change his shape, and he knew the value of Ogion's advice. So he sailed southward under the west-going stars, and the long night passed slowly until the first day of the new year brightened all the sea. Soon after the sun rose, he saw land ahead, but he was making little way towards it. The world's wind had dropped with daybreak. He raised a light mage wind into his sail to drive him towards that land. At the sight of it, fear had come into him again, the sinking dread that urged him to turn away, to run away. And he followed that fear as a hunter follows the signs, the broad, blunt, clawed tracks of the bear that may at any moment turn on him from the thickets. For he was close now. He knew it. It was a queer-looking land that loomed up over the sea as he drew nearer and nearer. What had from afar seemed to be one sheer mountain wall was split into several long, steep ridges, separate isles perhaps, between which the sea ran in narrow sounds or channels. Ged had pored over many charts and maps in the tower of the master namer on Roke, but these had been mostly of the archipelago and the inner seas. He was out in the East Reach now, and did not know what this island might be. Nor had he much thought for that. It was fear that lay ahead of him, that lurked hiding from him or waiting for him among the slopes and forests of the island, and straight for it he steered. Now the dark forest-crowned cliffs gloomed and towered high over his boat, and spray from the waves that broke against the rocky headlands blew spattering against his sail, as the mage wind bore him between two great capes into a sound, a sea lane that ran on before him deep into the island, no wider than the length of two galleys. The sea, confined, was restless and fretted at the steep shores. There were no beaches, for the cliffs dropped straight down into the water that lay darkened by the cold reflection of their heights. It was windless and very silent. The shadow had tricked him out onto the moors in Oskill, and tricked him in the mist onto the rocks, and now would there be a third trick? Had he driven the thing here, or had it drawn him here into a trap? He did not know. He knew only the torment of dread, and the certainty that he must go ahead and do what he had set out to do, hunt down the evil, follow his terror to its source. Very cautiously he steered, watching before him and behind him and up and down the cliffs on either hand. He had left the sunlight of the new day behind him on the open sea. All was dark here. The opening between the headlands seemed a remote, bright gateway when he glanced back. The cliffs loomed higher and ever higher overhead as he approached the mountain root from which they sprang, and the lane of water grew narrower. He peered ahead into the dark cleft, and left and right up the great, cavern-pocked, boulder-tumbled slopes where trees crouched with their roots half in air. Nothing moved. Now he was coming to the end of the inlet, a high, blank, wrinkled mass of rock against which, narrowed to the width of a little creek, the last sea waves lapped feebly. Fallen boulders and rotten trunks and the roots of gnarled trees left only a tight way to steer. A trap, a dark trap under the roots of the silent mountain, and he was in the trap. Nothing moved before him or above him. All was deathly still. He could go no farther. He turned the boat around, working her carefully round with spell and with makeshift oar, lest she knock up against the underwater rocks or be entangled in the outreaching roots and branches, till she faced outward again, and he was about to raise up a wind to take him back as he had come, when suddenly the words of the spell froze on his lips and his heart went cold within him. He looked back over his shoulder. The shadow stood behind him in the boat. Had he lost one instant, he had been lost, but he was ready, and lunged to seize and hold the thing which wavered and trembled there within arm's reach. No wizardry would serve him now, but only his own flesh, his life itself, against the unliving. He spoke no word, but attacked, and the boat plunged and pitched from his sudden turn and lunge. And pain ran up his arms into his breast, taking away his breath, and an icy cold filled him, and he was blinded. Yet in his hands that seized the shadow there was nothing, darkness, air. He stumbled forward, catching the mast to stay his fall, and light came shooting back into his eyes. He saw the shadow shudder away from him and shrink together, then stretch hugely up over him, over the sail for an instant. Then, like black smoke on the wind, it recoiled and fled, formless, down the water towards the bright gate between the cliffs. Ged sank to his knees. The little spell-patched boat pitched again, rocked itself to stillness, drifting on the uneasy waves. He crouched in it, numb, unthinking, struggling to draw breath, until at last cold water welling under his hands warned him that he must see to his boat, for the spells binding it were growing weak. He stood up, holding onto the staff that made the mast, and rewove the binding spell as best he could. He was chilled and weary. His hands and arms ached sorely, and there was no power in him. He wished he might lie down there in that dark place where sea and mountain met, and sleep on the restless rocking water. He could not tell if this weariness were a sorcery laid on him by the shadow as it fled, or came of the bitter coldness of its touch, or was from mere hunger and want of sleep and expensive strength. But he struggled against it, forcing himself to raise up a light mage wind into the sail and follow down the dark seaway where the shadow had fled. All terror was gone. All joy was gone. It was a chase no longer. He was neither hunted nor hunter now. For the third time they had met and touched, he had of his own will turned to the shadow, seeking to hold it with living hands. He had not held it, but he had forged between them a bond, a link that had no breaking point. There was no need to hunt the thing down, to track it, nor would its flight avail it. Neither could escape. When they had come to the time and place for their last meeting, they would meet. But until that time, and elsewhere than that place, there would never be any rest or peace for Ged, day or night, on earth or sea. He knew now, and the knowledge was hard, that his task had never been to undo what he had done, but to finish what he had begun. He sailed out from between the dark cliffs, and on the sea was broad, bright morning, with a fair wind blowing from the north. He drank what water he had left in the sealskin pouch, and steered around the westernmost headland until he came into a wide strait between it and a second island lying to the west. Then he knew the place, calling to mind sea charts of the East Reach. These were the Hands, a pair of lonely isles that reached their mountain fingers northward toward the Kargad lands. He sailed on between the two, and as the afternoon darkened with storm clouds coming up from the north, he came to shore on the southern coast of the West Isle. He had seen there was a little village there, above the beach where a stream came tumbling down to the sea, and he cared little what welcome he got if he could have water, fire's warmth, and sleep. The villagers were rough, shy people, awed by a wizard's staff, wary of a strange face, but hospitable to one who came alone oversea before a storm. They gave him meat and drink in plenty, and the comfort of firelight and the comfort of human voices speaking his own Hardic tongue, and last and best they gave him hot water to wash the cold and saltness of the sea from him, and a bed where he could sleep. That does sound nice. Oh, it's another hour and 10 minutes of reading, probably. Hello, Karen. How are you? Hey, can you enable the live comments so we can read after the stream ends? Cameron, it should be. I did enable live comments replay. I also turned off the monetization, so if you guys want to throw a tip in the tip jar, thank you. The dono button or paypal.me/Roganautica. Yeah, that should be there. How are you, Karen? Nice to see you. Chapter 9, Ifish. Ged spent 3 days in that village of the West Hand, recovering himself, and making ready a boat built not of spells and sea wrack, but of sound wood well pegged and caulked, with a stout mast and sail of her own, that he might sail easily and sleep when he needed. Like most boats of the north and the reaches, she was clinker-built, with planks overlapped and clenched one upon the other for strength in the high seas. Every part of her was sturdy and well made. Ged reinforced her wood with deep inwoven charms, for he thought he might go far in that boat. She was built to carry 2 or 3 men, and the old man who owned her said that he and his brothers had been through high seas and foul weather with her, and she had ridden all gallantly. Thank you, Karen. It's nice to see you, too. Unlike the shrewd fisherman of Gaunt, this old man, for fear and wonder of his wizardry, would have given the boat to Ged. But Ged paid him for it in sorcerer's kind, healing his eyes of the cataracts that were in the way of blinding him. Then the old man, rejoicing, said to him, "We called the boat Sanderling, but do you call her Lookfar, and paint eyes aside her prow, and my thanks will look out of that blind wood for you and keep you from rock and reef. For I had forgotten how much light there is in the world till you gave it back to me." Other works Ged also did in his days in that village under the steep forests of the Hand, as his power came back into him. There were such people as he had known as a boy in the northward vale of Gaunt, though poorer even than those. With them he was at home, as he would never be in the courts of the wealthy, and he knew their bitter wants without having to ask. So he laid charms of heal and ward on children who were lame or sickly, and spells of increase on the villagers' scrawny flocks of goats and sheep. He set the rune Simon on the spindles and looms, the boat's oars and tools of bronze and stone they brought him, that these might do their work well. And the rune Pier he wrote on the roof trees of the huts, which protects the house and its folk from fire, wind, and madness. When his boat Lookfar was ready and well stocked with water and dried fish, he stayed yet one more day in the village to teach to their young chanter the deed of Mored and the Havnorian lay. Very seldom did any archipelagan ship touch at the hands. Songs made 100 years ago were news to these villagers, and they craved to hear of heroes. Had Ged been free of what was laid on him, he would gladly have stayed there a week or a month to sing them what he knew, that the great songs might be known on a new isle. But he was not free, and the next morning he set sail, going straight south over the wide seas of the Reach, for southward the shadow had gone. He need cast no finding charm to know this. He knew it as certainly as if a fine, unreeling cord bound him and it together, no matter what miles and seas and lands might lie between. So he went certain, unhurried, and unhopeful, on the way he must go, and the wind of winter bore him to the south. He sailed a day and a night over the lonesome sea, and on the second day he came to a small isle, which they told him was called Vemish. The people in the little port looked at him askance, and soon their sorcerer came hurrying. He looked hard at Ged, and then he bowed, and said in a voice that was both pompous and wheedling, "Lord Wizard, forgive my temerity, and honor us by accepting of us anything you may need for your voyage. Food, drink, sailcloth, rope. My daughter is fetching to your boat at this moment a brace of fresh roasted hens. I think it prudent, however, that you continue on your way from here as soon as it meets your convenience to do so." The people are in some dismay. For not long ago, the day before yesterday, a person was seen crossing our humble isle afoot from north to south, and no boat was seen to come with him aboard it, nor no boat was seen to leave with him aboard it, and it did not seem that he cast any shadow. Those who saw this person tell me that he bore some likeness to yourself. Thank you, Kara. At that, Ged bowed his own head, and turned and went back to the docks of Vemish and sailed out, not looking back. There was no profit in frightening the islanders or making an enemy of their sorcerer. He would rather sleep at sea again and think over this news the sorcerer had told him, for he was sorely puzzled by it. The day ended, and the night passed with cold rain whispering over the sea all through the dark hours and gray dawn. Still the mild north wind carried Lookfar on. Afternoon, the rain and mist blew off, and the sun shone from time to time, and late in the day Ged saw right athwart his course the low blue hills of a great island, brightened by that drifting winter sunlight. The smoke of hearth fires lingered blue over the slate roofs of little towns among those hills, a pleasant sight in the vast sameness of the sea. Ged followed a fishing fleet into their port, and going up the streets of the town in the golden winter evening, he found an inn called the Hareki, where firelight and ale and roast ribs of mutton warmed him body and soul. At the tables of the inn, there were a couple of other voyagers, traders of the East Reach, but most of the men were townsfolk come there for good ale, news, and conversation. They were not rough, timid people like the fisher folk of the Hands, but true townsmen, alert and sedate. Surely they knew Ged for a wizard, but nothing at all was said of it, except that the innkeeper, in talking, and he was a talkative man, mentioned that this town, Ismay, was fortunate in sharing with other towns of the island the inestimable treasure of an accomplished wizard trained at the school on Roke, who had been given his staff by the Archmage himself, and who, though out of town at the moment, dwelt in his ancestral home right in Ismay itself, which, therefore, stood in no need of any other practitioner of the high arts. "As they say, two staffs in one town must come to blows. Isn't it so, sir?" said the innkeeper, smiling and full of cheer. So Ged was informed that as journeyman wizard, one seeking a livelihood from sorcery, he was not wanted here. Thus he had got a blunt dismissal from Vemish and a bland one from Ismay, and he wondered at what he had been told about the kindly ways of the East Reach. This isle was Ifish, where his friend Vetch had been born. It did not seem so hospitable a place as Vetch had said. And yet he saw that they were indeed kindly faces enough. It was only that they sensed what he knew to be true. that he was set apart from them, cut off from them, that he bore a doom upon him and followed after a dark thing. He was like a cold wind blowing through the firelit room, like a black bird carried on by a storm from foreign lands. The sooner he went on, taking his evil destiny with him, the better for these folk. I am on quest, he said to the innkeeper. I will be here only a night or two. His tone was bleak. The innkeeper, with a glance at the great yew staff in the corner, said nothing at all for once, but filled up Ged's cup with brown ale till the foam ran over the top. Ged knew that he should spend only the one night in Ismay. There was no welcome for him there, or anywhere. He must go where he was bound. But he was sick of the cold, empty sea and the silence where no voice spoke to him. He told himself he would spend one day in Ismay and on the morrow go. So he slept late. When he woke, a light snow was falling, and he idled about the lanes and byways of the town to watch the people busy at their doings. He watched children bundled in fur capes playing at snow castle and building snowmen. He heard gossips chatting across the street from open doors, and watched the bronze smith at work with a little lad red-faced and sweating to pump the long bellows sleeves at the smelting pit. Through windows lit with a dim ruddy gold from within as the short day darkened, he saw women at their looms, turning a moment to speak or smile to child or husband there in the warmth within the house. Ged saw all these things from outside and apart, alone, and his heart was very heavy in him, though he would not admit to himself that he was sad. As night fell, he still lingered in the streets, reluctant to go back to the inn. He heard a man and a girl talking together merrily as they came down the street past him towards the town square, and all at once he turned, for he knew the man's voice. Hold on a second. I'm going to blow my nose. And something in the air in this room or in Mississippi is making me extra snotty today. He followed and caught up with the pair, coming up beside them in the late twilight lit only by distant lantern gleams. The girl stepped back, but the man stared at him and then flung up the staff he carried, holding it between them as a barrier to ward off the threat or act of evil. And that was somewhat more than Ged could bear. His voice shook a little as he said, I thought you would know me, Vetch. Even then Vetch hesitated for a moment. I do know you, he said, and lowered the staff and took Ged's hand and hugged him round the shoulders. I do know you. Welcome, my friend, welcome. What a sorry greeting I gave you, as if you were a ghost coming up from behind, and I have waited for you to come and looked for you. So you are the wizard they boast of in Ismay, I wondered. Oh, yes, I'm their wizard. But listen, let me tell you why I didn't know you, lad. Maybe I've looked too hard for you. 3 days ago, were you here 3 days ago on Ifish? I came yesterday. 3 days ago in the street in Quor, the village up there in the hills, I saw you. That is, I saw a presentiment of you, or an imitation of you, or maybe simply a man who looks like you. He was ahead of me, going out of town, and he turned a bend in the road even as I saw him. I called and got no answer. I followed and found no one, nor any tracks, but the ground was frozen. It was a queer thing, and now seeing you come up out of the shadows like that, I thought I was tricked again. I am sorry, Ged. He spoke Ged's true name softly, so that the girl who stood waiting a little way behind him would not hear it. Ged also spoke low to use his friend's true name. No matter, Astariel, but this is myself, and I am glad to see you. Vetch heard perhaps something more than simple gladness in his voice. He had not yet let go of Ged's shoulder, and he said now, in the true speech, In trouble and from darkness you come, Ged, yet your coming is joy to me. Then he went on in his reach-accented Hardic, Come on, come home with us. We're going home. It's time to get in out of the dark. This is my sister, the youngest of us, prettier than I am, as you see, but much less clever. Yarrow, she's called. Yarrow, this is the Sparrowhawk, the best of us and my friend. Lord Wizard, the girl greeted him, and decorously she bobbed her head and hid her eyes with her hands to show respect, as women did in the East Reach. Her eyes, when not hidden, were clear, shy, and curious. She was perhaps 14 years old, dark like her brother, but very slight and slender. On her sleeve there clung, winged and taloned, a dragon no longer than her hand. He saw him in the hills, Karen. Yeah, I don't know if you've been around, Karen, for all of this, but the shadow thing that he's locked into this duel with is becoming more and more like him. So these last couple of times that somebody's seen someone who looks like him walking around, it's the shadow, I think, is what's going on. I mean, that seems pretty clearly what's going on. On her sleeve there clung, winged and taloned, a dragon no longer than her hand. They set off down the dusky street together, and Ged remarked as they went along, "In Gaunt, they say Gauntish women are brave, but I never saw a maiden there wear a dragon for a bracelet." This made Yarrow laugh, and she answered him straight, "This is only a Hareki. Have you no Hareki on Gaunt?" Then she got shy for a moment and hid her eyes. "No, nor no dragons. Is not the creature a dragon?" "A little one that lives in oak trees and eats wasps and worms and sparrows' eggs. It grows no greater than this. Oh, sir, my brother has told me often of the pet you had, the wild thing, the otak. Do you have it still?" "No, no longer." Vetch turned to him as if with a question, but he held his tongue and asked nothing till much later, when the two of them sat alone over the stone fire pit of Vetch's house. Though he was the chief wizard in the whole island of Ifish, Vetch made his home in Ismay, this small town where he had been born, living with his youngest brother and sister. His father had been a sea trader of some means, and the house was spacious and strong-beamed, with much homely wealth of pottery and fine weaving and vessels of bronze and brass on carven shelves and chests. A great Teonian harp stood in one corner of the main room, and Yarrow's tapestry loom in another, its tall frame inlaid with ivory. There Vetch, for all his plain quiet ways, was both a powerful wizard and a lord in his own house. There were a couple of old servants, prospering along with the house, and the brother, a cheerful lad, and Yarrow, quick and silent as a little fish, who served the two friends their supper and ate with them, listening to their talk, and afterwards slipped off to her own room. All things here were well-founded, peaceful, and assured, and Ged, looking about him at the firelit room, said, "This is how a man should live," and sighed. "Well, it's one good way," said Vetch. "There are others. Now, lad, tell me if you can what things have come to you and gone from you since we last spoke 2 years ago. And tell me what journey you are on, since I see well that you won't stay long with us this time." Ged told him, and when he was done, Vetch sat pondering for a long while. Then he said, "I'll go with you, Ged." "No, I think I will." "No, Astariel, this is no task or bane of yours. I began this evil course alone. I will finish it alone. I do not want any other to suffer from it, you least of all, you who tried to keep my hand from the evil act in the very beginning, Astariel." "Pride was ever your mind's master," his friend said, smiling, as if they talked of a matter of small concern to either. "Now think. It is your quest, assuredly. But if the quest fail, should there not be another there who might bear warning to the archipelago? For the shadow would be a fearful power then. And if you defeat the thing, should there not be another there who will tell of it in the archipelago, that the deed may be known and sung? I know I can be of no use to you, yet I think I should go with you." So entreated, Ged could not deny his friend, but he said, "I should not have stayed this day here. I knew it, but I stayed." "Wizards do not meet by chance, lad," said Vetch. "And after all, as you said yourself, I was with you at the beginning of your journey. It is right that I should follow you to its end." He put new wood on the fire, and they sat gazing into the flames a while. "There is one I have not heard of since that night on Rope Knoll, and I had no heart to ask any at the school of him. Jasper, I mean. He never won his staff. He left Roke that same summer, and went to the island of O to be sorcerer in the Lord's household at Otokni. I know no more of him than that." Again they were silent, watching the fire and enjoying, since it was a bitter night, the warmth on their legs and faces as they sat on the broad coping of the fire pit, their feet almost among the coals. Ged said at last, speaking low, "There is a thing that I fear, Astariel. I fear it more if you are with me when I go. There in the hands in the dead end of the inlet, I turned upon the shadow. It was within my hand's reach, and I seized it. I tried to seize it, and there was nothing I could hold. I could not defeat it. It fled, I followed, but that may happen again and yet again. I have no power over the thing. There may be neither death nor triumph to end this quest, nothing to sing of, no end. It may be I must spend my life running from sea to sea and land to land on an endless vain venture, a shadow quest." Avert, said Vetch, turning his left hand in the gesture that turns aside the ill chance spoken of. Avert. Avert. That's interesting. I disavow. Avert, said Vetch, turning his left hand in the gesture that turns aside the ill chance spoken of. For all his somber thoughts, this made Ged grin a little, for it is rather a child's charm than a wizard's. There was always such village innocence in Vetch. Yet also he was keen, shrewd, direct to the center of a thing. He said now, that is a grim thought, and I trust a false one. I guess rather that what I saw begin, I may see end. Somehow you will learn its nature, its being, what it is, and so hold and bind and vanquish it. Though that is a hard question, what is it? There is a thing that worries me. I do not understand it. It seems the shadow now goes in your shape, or a kind of likeness of you at least, as they saw it on Vemish, and as I saw it here in Ifish. How may that be, and why? And why did it never do so in the archipelago? They say rules change in the reaches. Aye, a true saying, I can tell you. There are good spells I learned on Roke that have no power here or go all awry. And also there are spells worked here I never learned on Roke. Every land has its own powers, and the farther one goes from the inner lands, the less one can guess about those powers and their governance. But I do not think it is only that which works this change in the shadow. Yes, Karen, Vetch is actually wiser than Sparrowhawk, than Ged, but he's not as accomplished a wizard. He's Sam in Lord of the Rings. Like it's the same archetypes. But I do not think that it is only that which works this change in the shadow. Nor do I. I think that when I ceased to flee from it and turned against it, that turning of my will upon it gave it shape and form, even though the same act prevented it from taking my strength from me. All my acts have their echo in it. It is my creature. In Oskill it named you, and so stopped any wizardry you might have used against it. Why did it not do so again, there in the hands? I do not know. Perhaps it is only from my weakness that it draws the strength to speak. Almost with my own tongue it speaks, for how did it know my name? How did it know my name? I have racked my brains on that over all the seas since I left Gaunt, and I cannot see the answer. Maybe it cannot speak at all in its own form or formlessness, but only with burrowed tongue, as a Gebeth. I do not know. Then you must beware meeting it in Gebeth form a second time. I think... Buddy, don't be dumb. You're going to pull all that down. Won't you hop down from there? Pie-whack it. Come down. There you go. This is my cat Pie-whack it. I just want to say hello. There she is. You want treats, don't you, Pie? But I don't have treats. I am too broke to have cat treats. I love you too, Pie-whack it. You're my friend. You're my little familiar Pie. I love you, buddy. She's purring. She isn't normally this affectionate. She's a very standoffish kind of cat. I'm going to go back to reading. Are you good, Pie? Do you want me to pull this closer so you can be close? Yeah, let's do this. Here we go. There you go. Book is upside down now. I think, Ged replied, stretching out his hands to the red coals as if he felt an inward chill. I think I will not. It is bound to me now as I am to it. It cannot get so far free of me as to seize any other man and empty him of will and being as it did Skior. It can possess me. If ever I weaken again and try to escape from it, to break the bond, it will possess me. How did I manage to make the lamp so much worse? Can I put that over there? If ever I weaken again and try to escape from it, to break the bond, it will possess me. And yet, when I held it with all the strength I had, it became mere vapor and escaped from me. And so it will again, and yet it cannot really escape, for I can always find it. I am bound to the foul, cruel thing, and will be forever, unless I can learn the word that masters it, its name. Brooding, his friend asked, are there names in the dark realms? Gensher the Archmage said there are not. My master Ogion said otherwise. Infinite are the arguments of mages, Vetch quoted with a smile that was somewhat grim. She who served the old power on Oskil swore that the stone would tell me the shadow's name, but that I count for little. However, there was also a dragon who offered to trade that name for his own, to be rid of me, and I have thought that, where mages argue, dragons may be wise. Oh, there are treats. Pyewacket wants me to give her some of this liquid treat stuff. Hold on. Hold on. I'm going to interrupt to give the cat some. Yeah, you want some of this. So I got these a while ago. These are pouches of liquid treat. Pyewacket really likes them. She likes them a lot more than her sister. In fact, she will eat the whole thing, and then she will have digestive upset. But, I eat whole boxes of Twinkies. I've been there myself. Oh, you guys you ready, huh? Yeah? Yeah. Oh, now my hands are gross. Hold on. Where was I? Right. Hold on. Let me clear my throat. I actually, when I have these smoker's cough moments, I have bad allergies too. But it's mostly smoking cough. I try to mute it because the cough makes the levels pop. Like I don't have any kind of, whatever it does automatically is all that's going on here. So your cat is senior. She has kidney disease and on a prescription diet and can't have treats anymore. Aw. Well, I mean, this stuff is probably not good for these guys at all. Like I said, it upsets Pie's stomach. I can't read with the glasses on anymore. They don't work right. I have thought that where mages argue dragons may be wise. Wise but unkind. But what dragon is this? You did not tell me you had been talking with dragons since I saw you last. They talked together late that night, and though always they came back to the bitter matter of what lay before Ged, yet their pleasure in being together overrode awe. For the love between them was strong and steadfast, unshaken by time or chance. In the morning, Ged woke beneath his friend's roof, and while he was still drowsy, he felt such well-being as if he were in some place wholly defended from evil and harm. All day long, a little of this dream peace clung to his thoughts, and he took it not as a good omen, but as a gift. It seemed likely to him that leaving this house he would leave the last haven he was to know, and so while the short dream lasted, he would be happy about it. I'm cute, thank you, Karen. Having affairs he must see to before he left Ifish, Vetch went off to other villages of the island with the lad who served him as prentice sorcerer. Ged stayed with Yarrow and her brother, called Murray, who was between her and Vetch in age. He seemed not much more than a boy, for there was no gift or scourge of mage power in him. And he had never been anywhere but Ifish, Tok, and Halp, and his life was easy and untroubled. Ged watched him with wonder and some envy, and exactly as he had watched Ged, to each it seemed very queer that the other, so different, yet was his own age, 19 years. He's only 19. Ged marveled how one who had lived 19 years could be so carefree. Admiring Murray's comely, cheerful face, he felt himself to be all lank and harsh, never guessing that Murray envied him even the scars that scored his face, and thought them the track of a dragon's claws and the very rune and sign of a hero. It's funny. My traveling out west and doing screenwriting and stuff when I was young, I had similar moments. And I had a daughter when I was 19. There were a lot of ways in which I was ahead of my peers that sure did not seem comfortable to me. But it was a little bit older than that. His envy got to him. Yeah, and this book is really Ursula Le Guin, the author, she's really smart about characters. She's really insightful. She was pretty young when she wrote this, actually, in 68. If she's still alive, she's about 95 now, because there were interviews with her on Facebook where she looked great and she was in good shape, and she was like 91. It wasn't that long ago, maybe 5 or 10 years. This was written in 1968. The two young men were thus somewhat shy with each other, but as for Yarrow, she soon lost her awe of Ged, being in her own house and mistress of it. He was very gentle with her, and many were the questions she asked of him, for Vetch, she said, would never tell her anything. She kept busy those 2 days, making dry wheat cakes for the voyagers to carry, and wrapping up dried fish and meat and other such provender to stock their boat, until Ged told her to stop, for he did not plan to sail clear to Celador without a halt. Where is Celador? Very far out in the western reach, where dragons are as common as mice. Best stay in the east, then. Our dragons are as small as mice. There's your meat, then. You're sure that's enough? Listen, I don't understand. You and my brother both are mighty wizards. You wave your hand and mutter, and the thing is done. Why do you get hungry, then? When it comes supper time at sea, why not say meat pie, and the meat pie appears, and you eat it? Well, we could do so, but we don't much wish to eat our words, as they say. Meat pie is only a word, after all. We can make it odorous and savorous, and even filling, but it remains a word. It fools the stomach and gives no strength to the hungry man. Wizards, then, are not cooks, said Murray, who was sitting across the kitchen hearth from Ged, carving a box lid of fine wood. He was a woodworker by trade, though not a very zealous one. Nor are cooks wizards, alas, said Yarrow, on her knees to see if the last batch of cakes baking on the hearth bricks was getting brown. But I still don't understand, Sparrowhawk. I have seen my brother, and even his prentice, make light in a dark place only by saying one word. And the light shines, it is bright, not a word, but a light you can see your way by. Aye, Ged answered, light is a power, a great power by which we exist, but which exists beyond our needs in itself. Sunlight and starlight are time, and time is light. In the sunlight, in the days and years, life is. In a dark place, life may call upon the light, naming it. But usually when you see a wizard name or call upon something, some object to appear, that is not the same. He calls upon no power greater than himself, and what appears is an illusion only. To summon a thing that is not there at all, to call it by speaking its true name, that is a great mastery, not lightly used. Not for mere hunger's sake. Yarrow, your little dragon has stolen a cake. Yarrow had listened so hard, gazing at Ged as he spoke, that she had not seen the Hareki scuttle down from its warm perch on the kettle hook over the hearth and seize a wheat cake bigger than itself. She took the small scaly creature on her knee and fed it bits and crumbs while she pondered what Ged had told her. Sister knew more knowledge than the brother. Yeah, he seems to be painting that the older brother is kind of dumb. Like, not in a judgmental way, but she said he's not a very zealous worker. A couple of other little things. So then you would not summon up a real meat pie, lest you disturb what my brother is always talking about. I forget its name. Equilibrium, Ged replied soberly, for she was very serious. Yes, but when you were shipwrecked, you sailed from the place in a boat woven mostly of spells, and it didn't leak water. Was it illusion? Well, partly it was illusion, because I am uneasy seeing the sea through great holes in my boat, so I patched them for the looks of the thing. But the strength of the boat was not illusion, nor summoning, but made with another kind of art, a binding spell. The wood was bound as one whole, one entire thing. A boat. What is a boat but a thing that doesn't leak water? I've bailed some that do, said Murray. Well, mine leaked too, unless I was constantly seeing to the spell. He bent down from his corner seat and took a cake from the bricks and juggled it in his hands. I too have stolen a cake. You have burned fingers, then, and when you're starving on the waste water between the far isles, you'll think of that cake and say, ah, had I not stolen that cake, I might eat it now, alas. I shall eat my brother's, so he can starve with you. Thus is equilibrium maintained, Gad marked, while she took and munched a hot, half-toasted cake, and this made her giggle and choke. But presently, looking serious again, she said, I wish I could truly understand what you tell me. I am too stupid. Little sister, Ged said, it is I that have no skill explaining. If we had more time— We will have more time, Yarrow said. When my brother comes back home, you will come with him for a while at least, won't you? If I can, he answered gently. There was a little pause, and Yarrow asked, watching the Hareki climb back to its perch, Tell me just this, if it is not a secret. What other great powers are there beside the light? It is no secret. All power is one in source and end, I think. Years and distances, stars and candles, water and wind and wizardry, the craft is a man's hand, and the wisdom in a tree's root, they all arise together. My name and yours, and the true name of the sun, or a spring of water, or an unborn child, all are syllables of the great word that is very slowly spoken by the shining of the stars. There is no other power, no other name. Staying his knife on the carved wood, Murray asked, What of death? The girl listened, her shining black head bent down. For a word to be spoken, Ged answered slowly, there must be silence, before and after. Then all at once he got up, saying, I have no right to speak of these things. The word that was mine to say I said wrong. It is better that I keep still. I will not speak again. Maybe there is no true power but the dark. And he left the fireside and the warm kitchen, taking up his cloak and going out alone into the drizzling cold rain of winter in the streets. He is under a curse, Murray said, gazing somewhat fearfully after him. I think this voyage he is on leads him to his death, the girl said, and he fears that, yet he goes on. This book is just full of great touches. It's just really good. It's such good writing. I think this voyage he's on leads him to his death, the girl said, and he fears that, yet he goes on. She lifted her head as if she watched, through the red flame of the fire, the course of a boat that came through the seas of winter alone and went on out into empty seas. Then her eyes filled with tears a moment, but she said nothing. Vetch came home the next day and took his leave of the notables of Ismay, who were most unwilling to let him go off to sea in midwinter on a mortal quest not even his own. But though they might reproach him, there was nothing at all they could do to stop him. Growing weary of old men who nagged him, he said, I am yours by parentage and custom and by duty undertaken towards you. I am your wizard. But it is time you recalled that, though I am a servant, I am not your servant. When I am free to come back, I will come back. Till then, farewell. At daybreak, as grey light welled up in the east from the sea, the two young men set forth in Lukfar from the harbor of Ismay, raising a brown, strong-woven sail to the north wind. On the dock, Yarrow stood and watched them go, as sailors' wives and sisters stand on all the shores of all Earthsea watching their men go out on the sea, and they do not wave or call aloud, but stand still in hooded cloak of grey or brown, there on the shore that dwindles smaller and smaller from the boat while the water grows wide between. Chapter 10, The Open Sea. This is the last chapter. There's 10 chapters, huh? Are neatly arranged. the touch of smoker's cough. Like, I don't really smoke a lot, but the readings bring it out. Like, literally, like, I cough up all the smoking, which is good for me, but I really just need to quit smoking. When I get a reasonable income secured, I will give up tobacco and marijuana and only eat gummies, and I will be much better off. My voice will be in better shape. For the streams. Chapter 10, The Open Sea. The haven now was sunk from sight, and Lookfar's painted eyes, wave-drenched, looked ahead on seas ever wider and more desolate. In 2 days and nights the companions made the crossing from Iffish to Sodder's Island, 100 miles of foul weather and contrary winds. Hey, A.J. Mead, how are you? Very even. Very even. That's sort of cryptic. You're super sick right now? It's gross? Well, I'm coughing up, snorting snot up, but I always do that. I'm not sick. Not any more than usual. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you are. I hope there's drugs you can take that you have that will make it better. Some of you are perhaps aware that there are drugs for sicknesses. Here in the United States, they're rare. You don't really get to take drugs when you're ill. You can have Benadryl and Kratom, which might be bad for you. Where was I? Right. In 2 days and nights, the companions made the crossing from Iffish to Sodder's Island, 100 miles of foul weather and contrary winds. They stayed in port there only briefly, long enough to refill a waterskin and to buy a tar-smeared sailcloth to protect some of their gear in the undecked boat from seawater and rain. They had not provided this earlier, because ordinarily a wizard looks after such small conveniences by way of spells, the very least and commonest kind of spells, and indeed it takes little more magic to freshen seawater and so save the bother of carrying fresh water. But Ged seemed most unwilling to use his craft or to let Vetch use his. He said only, "It's better not." Oh, 10 chapters is very even? Yeah, it's a short book. I don't know. I mean, this is what, 5 readings? So, and one of them was short, and this one's going to be long, but it's basically 7 or 8 hours of reading total. In 1968, I'm not sure how often this kind of heroic fantasy would have been marketed as children's literature or YA literature. That marketing category didn't really exist then the way it does now. This sure feels like she intended it for like 9th and 10th graders, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure how you would even look that up easily, because it's the kind of detail of literary and publishing history that gets lost. Like, when I was young in the 70s, well, you just said you were born in 67, there wasn't that much fantasy and science fiction that was aimed at 10 to 16-year-olds. And it generally wasn't marketed that way. Like, some writers targeted that audience, but sort of on their own recognizance. And the very few really good science fiction and fantasy books that were aimed at smart teenagers were like this, written on an adult level, but slightly down, but not really. There wasn't a whole separate marketing category where books were aimed dead at teens, like the Hunger Games Harry Potter thing. That just didn't exist in the 60s. Weed and booze does help. Yeah, I was about to make a drug joke that's inappropriate. I try not to swear in these reading streams. Have I sworn in this one? I really don't know. Thank you, Karen, for the compliment. Ged seemed most unwilling to use his craft or to let Vetch use his. He said only, "It's better not," and his friend did not ask or argue, for as the wind first filled their sail, both had felt a heavy foreboding, cold as that winter wind. Haven, harbor, peace, safety, all that was behind. They had turned away. They went now a way in which all events were perilous and no acts were meaningless. On the course on which they were embarked, the saying of the least spell might change chance and move the balance of power and of doom, for they went now toward the very center of that balance, toward the place where light and darkness meet. Those who travel thus say no word carelessly. Sailing out again and coasting round the shores of Sodders, where white snowfields faded up into foggy hills, Ged took the boat southward again, and now they entered waters where the great traders of the archipelago never come, the outmost fringes of the reach. Vetch asked no question about their course, knowing that Ged did not choose it but went as he must go. As Sodder's Island grew small and pale behind them, and the waves hissed and smacked under the prow, and the great gray plain of water circled them all round clear to the edge of the sky, Ged asked, "What lands lie ahead this course?" "Due south of Sodder's there are no lands at all. Southeast you go a long way and find little, Pellimer, Cornay, Gosk, and Astowel, which is also called Last Land. Beyond it the open sea." "What is to the southwest?" "Rolameni, which is one of our East Reach isles, and some small islets round about it, then nothing till you enter the South Reach, Rude and Tomb, and the Isle of the Ear, where men do not go." "We may," Ged said wryly. "I'd rather not," said Vetch. "That is a disagreeable part of the world, they say, full of bones and portents. Sailors say that there are stars to be seen from the waters by the Isle of the Ear and far shore that cannot be seen anywhere else and that have never been named." "Aye, there was a sailor on the ship that brought me first to Roke who spoke of that. And he told tales of the raft folk in the far South Reach, who never come to land but once a year." "Yes, Pyewacket?" Sorry, I got distracted. Seems the time of this read was in the late 1800s travel. So, Karen, it takes place in a fantasy world. It's very like Middle Earth with Tolkien. It's sort of pseudo late medieval. He did mention a longbow. I think that's the most advanced technology in this story. So yeah, it's like Tolkien or Conan, Howard's Conan stories. It takes place in a sort of a barbarous Never Never Land. And none of these places really exist, of course. The whole continent of Earthsea in the title is an archipelago. It's several hundred islands. There are other Earthsea novels, by the way. There's 2 other novels, and there's a collection of short stories, and the Miyazaki movie, Tales of Earthsea, which the Studio Ghibli movie, actually, it's not a Miyazaki movie, it's Ghibli. It's pretty good, but it's a B movie for Ghibli. It's low budget for them. And it's not based on this. I don't know if it's based on any of her stories. Sailors say that there are stars to be seen from the waters by the Isle of the Ear and far shore that cannot be seen anywhere else and that have never been named. "Aye, there was a sailor on the ship that brought me first to Roke who spoke of that, and he told tales of the raft folk in the far South Reach who never come to land but once a year to cut the great logs for their rafts, and the rest of the year, all the days and months, they drift on the currents of ocean out of sight of any land. I'd like to see those raft villages." "I would not," said Vetch, grinning. "Give me land and landfolk, the sea in its bed and I in mine." "I wish I could have seen all the cities of the archipelago," Ged said as he held the sail rope, watching the wide gray wastes before them. "Havnor at the world's heart, and Ea where the myths were born, and Sheliath of the fountains on way, all the cities and the great lands, and the small lands, the strange lands of the outer reaches, them too, to sail right down the Dragon's Run." "What are you doing? Pyewacket, do not do that." You know better. Get my vitamins. Do not play with my pill bottles. What are you doing? She might want more food. They need toys, actually. My cats need cat toys. I had some cat toys that I brought with them, but I never saw them after the hotel room. I must have just forgotten to gather them up. To sail right down the Dragon's Run away in the west, or to sail north into the ice floes clear to Hogan Land. Some say that is a land greater than all the archipelago, and others say it is mere reefs and rocks with ice between. No one knows. I should like to see the whales and the northern seas, but I cannot. I must go where I am bound to go and turn my back on the bright shores. I was in too much haste, and now have no time left. I traded all the sunlight in the cities and the distant lands for a handful of power, for a shadow, for the dark. So, as the mage-born will, Ged made his fear and regret into a song, a brief lament, half-sung, that was not for himself alone, and his friend, replying, spoke the hero's words from the deed of Erith Actby, "Oh, may I see the earth's bright hearth once more, the white towers of Havnor." So they sailed on their narrow course over the wide, forsaken waters. The most they saw that day was a school of silver pannies swimming south, but never a dolphin leaped, nor did the flight of gull or moray or tern break the gray air. As the east darkened and the west grew red, Vetch brought out food and divided it between them and said, "Here's the last of the ale. I drink to the one who thought to put the keg aboard for thirsty men in cold weather, my sister Yarrow." At that Ged left off his bleak thoughts and his gazing ahead over the sea, and he saluted Yarrow more earnestly, perhaps, than Vetch. Yeah, I didn't stop to mention it, but it's really cool that she didn't mention that he's 19, except a couple pages before she mentioned that his wizard friend's younger sister is 14. And though they don't flirt with each other, it's clear that if there wasn't this doom on him, he could settle in the islands and eventually hook up with his friend's sister and live happily ever after. But he's busy and he's on his way somewhere. At that, Ged left off his bleak thoughts and his gazing ahead over the sea, and he saluted Yarrow more earnestly, perhaps, than Vetch. The thought of her brought to his mind the sense of her wise and childish sweetness. She was not like any person he had known. What young girl had he ever known at all, but he never thought of that. "She is like a little fish, a minnow, that swims in a clear creek," he said, "defenseless, yet you cannot catch her." At this, Vetch looked straight at him, smiling. "You are a mage born," he said. "Her true name is Kest." In the old speech, Kest is minnow, as Ged well knew, and this pleased him to the heart. But after a while he said in a low voice, "You should not have told me her name, maybe." But Vetch, who had not done so lightly, said, "Her name is safe with you as mine is, and besides, you knew it without my telling you." Red sank to ashes in the west, and ash gray sank to black. All the sea and sky were wholly dark. Ged stretched out in the bottom of the boat to sleep, wrapped in his cloak of wool and fur. Vetch, holding the sail rope, sang softly from the deed of Enlad, where the song tells how the mage Mored the White left Havnor in his oarless longship, and coming to the island Solea saw Elfaran in the orchards in the spring. Ged slept before the song came to the sorry end of their love, Mored's death, the ruin of Enlad, the sea waves vast and bitter whelming the orchards of Solea. Toward midnight he woke and watched again while Vetch slept. The little boat ran sharp over choppy seas, fleeing the strong wind that leaned on her sail, running blind through the night. But the overcast had broken, and before dawn the thin moon shining between brown-edged clouds shed a weak light on the sea. "The moon wanes to her dark," Vetch murmured, awake in the dawn, when for a while the cold wind dropped. Ged looked up at the white half-ring above the paling eastern waters, but said nothing. The dark of the moon that follows first after sun return is called the fallows, and is the contrary pole of the days of the moon and the long dance in summer. It is an unlucky time for travelers and for the sick. Children are not given their true name during the fallows, and no deeds are sung, nor swords nor edge tools sharpened, nor oaths sworn. It is the dark axis of the year when things done are ill done. 3 days out from Sodders they came, following seabirds and shore wrack, to Pellimer, a small isle humped high above the high grey seas. Its people spoke Hardic, but in their own fashion, strange even to Vetch's ears. The young men came ashore there for fresh water and a respite from the sea, and at first were well received, with wonder and commotion. There was a sorcerer in the main town of the island, but he was mad. He would talk only of the great serpent that was eating at the foundations of Pellimer, so that soon the island must go adrift like a boat cut from her moorings and slide out over the edge of the world. At first he greeted the young wizards courteously, but as he talked about the serpent, he began to look askance at Ged, and then he fell to railing at them there in the street, calling them spies and servants of the sea snake. The Palamirians looked dourly at them after that, since though mad, he was their sorcerer. So Ged and Vetch made no long stay, but set forth again before nightfall, going always south and east. In these days and nights of sailing, Ged never spoke of the shadow, nor directly of his quest, and the nearest Vetch came to asking any question was, as they followed the same course farther and farther out and away from the known lands of Earthsea, "Are you sure?" To this Ged answered only, "Is the iron sure where the magnet lies?" Vetch nodded, and they went on, no more being said by either. But from time to time they talked of the crafts and devices that mages of old days had used to find out the hidden name of baneful powers and beings, how Nereger of Paln had learned the black mage's name from overhearing the conversation of dragons, and how Mored had seen his enemy's name written by falling raindrops in the dust of the battlefield of the plains of Enlad. They spoke of finding spells and invocations, and those answerable questions which only the master patterner of Roke can ask. But often Ged would end by murmuring words which Ogion had said to him on the shoulder of Gaunt Mountain in an autumn long ago. To hear, one must be silent. And he would fall silent and ponder, hour by hour, always watching the sea ahead of the boat's way. Sometimes it seemed to Vetch that his friends saw, across the waves and miles and gray days yet to come, the thing they followed and the dark end of their voyage. All right. It's probably about another 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I should interrupt myself while I'm stopping for a second to invite you to give me money again. Thanks. Dude, those are ramen noodles. That's not cat treats. No, Pie Wacket, it's ramen noodles. It's not for you, buddy. Why are you such a troublemaker, nobody? Well, why must you be so? Why must you be so? Also, where's my plastic spoon? Did you throw that on the floor too? You little monster. I whack it. That spoon should be right here next to the other thing. You did. You lost my plastic spoon. Here it is. It's a black plastic spoon from some takeout. I hold onto it to take the kratom because it's thinner than a metal spoon from the kitchen, so it's easier to scoop the kratom up. Oh man. My nose, my ears are trying to pop. There's like a pressure thing going on. Is it that stormy out? It was raining earlier. I don't know if stormy is the right word. I'm trying to pop my ears. Oh, I gotta blow my nose again. What is with me? Maybe I am getting sick. Maybe I'm coming down with a cold. It is like some side effect of the long readings. Like it's weirdly enervating to read for an hour and a half straight, 2 hours straight. Who knew? Who knew? Right. They passed between Cornay and Gosk in foul weather, seeing neither isle in the fog and rain, and knowing they had passed them only on the next day, when they saw ahead of them an isle of pinnacled cliffs above which seagulls wheeled in huge flocks whose meowing clamor could be heard from far over the sea. Vetch said, "That will be Astowell, from the look of it, last land. East and south of it the charts are empty." "Yet they who live there may know of farther lands," Ged answered. "Why do you say so?" Vetch asked, for Ged had spoken uneasily, and his answer to this again was halting and strange. "Not there," he said, gazing at Astowell ahead and past it or through it. "Not there. Not on the sea. Not on the sea, but on dry land." "What land?" "Before the springs of the open sea, beyond the sources, behind the gates of daylight." Then he fell silent, and when he spoke again it was in an ordinary voice, as if he had been freed from a spell or a vision and had no clear memory of it. The port of Astowell, a creek mouth between rocky heights, was on the northern shore of that isle, and all the huts of the town faced north and west. It was as if the island turned its face, though from so far away, always towards Earthsea, towards mankind. Hey, Justo Dean, how are you? You're here for the end. I'm a little tired. I've been reading a little long, but it's only it's 10 more pages, so... Excitement and dismay attended the arrival of strangers in a season when no boat had ever braved the seas around Astowell. The women all stayed in the wattle huts, peering out the door, hiding their children behind their skirts, drawing back fearfully into the darkness of the huts as the strangers came up from the beach. The men, lean fellows, ill-clothed against the cold, gathered in a solemn circle about Vetch and Ged, and each one held a stone hand-axe or a knife of shell. But once their fear was past, they made the strangers very welcome, and there was no end to their questions. Seldom did any ship come to them, even from Sodders or Rollamany. Them having nothing to trade for bronze or fine wares, they had not even any wood. Their boats were coracles woven of reed, and it was a brave sailor who would go as far as Gosk or Cornay in such a craft. They dwelt all alone here at the edge of all the maps. They had no witch... What are you doing? What is that? Stop that. Stop that. Stop it. That is absolutely not for you. Stop doing that. Yeah, it's not for you, Pie Wacket. No, don't play with it. It's a bottle of fucking pills, dude. I don't know why she's doing that. What's wrong with you, Pie Wacket? I think you can see her. She went up to the top of the mattress there. I threw the pills at her and then I rattled them. It's a bottle of vitamins, but I can't have her attacking pill bottles and thinking they're toys. That's really bad. Sometimes it's a pill she doesn't need to be even touching the bottle, for God's sake. I have the water gun I use to punish the cats when they're being bad, but it's in the living room. I don't know why she's agitating, actually. That's really... Look, she's doing a happy tail now. What is that? Why are you bad? Why are you both so bad? Missed me today? Thanks, Justo Dean. I'm here now. I'm a little unbreathed. I don't know when you came in, but I went for a couple hours in the afternoon. And then I went out to do laundry at my friend Sylvia's house and drank wine with Sylvia. So I didn't get back here until, I don't know, 9? Yeah. So I didn't start doing the reading stream until 11:30. I'm all cattywampus today. But I am damn well going to finish reading this book tonight. I'm a little tired and out of breath, but I've got to finish reading it. I'm 10 pages from the end. They had no witch or sorcerer, and seemed not to recognize the young wizards' staffs for what they were, admiring them only for the precious stuff they were made of, wood. Their chief or isleman was very old, and he alone of his people had ever before seen a man born in the archipelago. Ged, therefore, was a marvel to them. The men brought their little sons to look at the archipelagan, so they might remember him when they were old. So that's a race thing, actually. She doesn't mention it often, but he's sort of light-skinned black. Like she mentions that they're not really dark-skinned, but they're definitely not white. But parts of the archipelago are populated by white people. She's kind of mentioned it a couple of times. Ursula Le Guin, her background was as an anthropologist, so it affects her science fiction and her fantasy a lot. That trained anthropology. Um, um, it's why she's so smart about the culture of small towns and out of the way places, and yeah, the way she handles race is just completely like it's not political at all, especially for 1968. Also, she doesn't handle gender like she's a female writer at all. Like there's just nothing. It's not particularly male, but it's not particularly girly either. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative. It's a point of interest that I've mentioned before a couple of nights ago that the generation before her in fantasy and science fiction who were female, they wrote with a male mimetic voice a lot because the publishers believed the audience was almost all male. I don't think that was ever true, but the business sure thought it was. Like comic books before the last 20 years, they just thought it was boys' literature. You got lit and was going to go to bed, but you went out. I still haven't eaten. Like I ate one slice of bread today. I gotta eat. I gotta eat something as soon as I finish this. Thanks for being here, guys. Ged therefore was a marvel to them. The men brought their little sons to look at the archipelagan so they might remember him when they were old. The subtext of that is like he's an African in 18th century Europe. Like he's just a weird kind of person. I've never seen somebody who looks like him before. They had never heard of Gaunt, only of Havnor and Ea, and took him for a lord of Havnor. He did his best to answer their questions about the white city he had never seen, but he was restless as the evening wore on, and at last he asked the men of the village as they sat crowded round the fire pit in the lodge house in the reeking warmth of the goat dung and broom faggots that were all their fuel, "What lies eastward of your land?" They were silent, some grinning, others grim. The old Isleman answered, "The sea." "There is no land beyond?" "This is last land. There is no land beyond. There's nothing but water till world's edge." "These are wise men, father," said a younger man, "seafarers, voyagers. Maybe they know of a land. Maybe they know of a land we do not know of." "There is no land east of this land," said the old man, and he looked long at Ged and spoke no more to him. The companions slept that night in the smoky warmth of the lodge. Before daylight, Ged roused his friend, whispering, "Estariel, wake. We cannot stay. We must go." "Why so soon?" Vetch asked, full of sleep. "Not soon. Late. I have followed too slow. It has found the way to escape me and so doom me. It must not escape me, for I must follow it however far it goes. If I lose it, I am lost." "Where do we follow it?" "Eastward. Come, I filled the water skins." It's energy, masculine and feminine, not gender. Yeah. Totally. It's also, it arises from her being an anthropologist also, in that she it's not a cold, distant scientific paper writing voice, but there's an odd, cold, distant element in her writing voice that is without gender. Yeah, and maybe, it's more like a masculine energy than a feminine energy. The way she writes women, though, gives away her gender a little bit. Not much. Though, then again, the female characters all being supporting characters structurally in this story, again, it's not the way women write normally, female characters. It was embedded in the genre, the state of the genre at the time. This was written in 1968. So they left the lodge before any in the village was awake, except a baby that cried a little in the darkness of some hut and fell still again. By the vague starlight they found the way down to the creek mouth, and untied Lookfar from the rock cairn where she had been made fast, and pushed her out into the black water. So they set out eastward from Asterwell into the open sea on the first day of the fallows, before sunrise. That day they had clear skies. The world's wind was cold and gusty from the northeast, but Ged had raised the mage wind, the first act of magery he had done since he left the Isle of the Hands. They sailed very fast due eastward. The boat shuddered with the great smoking sunlit waves that hit her as she ran, but she went gallantly as her builder had promised, answering the mage wind as true as any spell and woven ship of Roke. Ged spoke not at all that morning, except to renew the power of the wind spell or to keep a charmed strength in the sail, and Vetch finished his sleep, though uneasily, in the stern of the boat. Are you planning to be bad some more? Why are you guys so bad? What is this? What are you guys being weird about? It's fine. Oh my God. They romping. My cats, they romping. Ged spoke not at all that morning, except to renew the power of the wind spell or to keep a charmed strength in the sail, and Vetch finished his sleep, though uneasily, in the stern of the boat. At noon they ate. Ged doled their food out sparingly, and the portent of this was plain. But both of them chewed their bit of salt fish and wheaten cake, and neither said anything. All afternoon they cleaved eastward, never turning nor slackening pace. Once Ged broke his silence, saying, "Do you hold with those who think the world is all landless sea beyond the outer reaches, or with those who imagine other archipelagos or vast undiscovered lands on the other face of the world?" At this time, said Vetch, I hold with those who think the world has but one face, and he who sails too far will fall off the edge of it. What are you guys doing? Oh, they're just playing. They're just playing. Oh, because I gave them that liquid treat stuff. They're all amped up now. You guys can probably see them running up that mattress leaning against the wall back there. That's the mattress I sleep on. There isn't room in here for me to do anything unless I prop that up against the wall. Why did I scold her and take the vitamins away? Why bother? All right, it's fine. All right, I'm gonna try to pretend that isn't going on. You can't really see, but they're running up and down the mattress like they're Spider-Man. They're like both hanging off the side of the mattress just out of sight on this edge, batting at each other around it. What has gotten into you girls? Oh my God. I'm not going to scold them just for having fun, though. I am weird. Or smashing my guitar. I mean, I hadn't been playing it much lately. It's fine. How is this even standing up still? How did you guys manage that? Can we please not smash my guitar? Where the hell was I? At this time, said Vetch, I hold with those who think the world has but one face, and he who sails too far will fall off the edge of it. Ged did not smile. There was no mirth left in him. Who knows what a man might meet out there? Not we, who always keep to our coasts and shores. Some have sought to know and have not returned, and no ship has ever come to us from lands we do not know. Ged made no reply. All that day, all that night, they went driven by the powerful wind of Maedry over the great swells of ocean eastward. Ged kept watch from dusk till dawn, for in darkness the force that drew or drove him grew stronger yet. Always he watched ahead, though his eyes in the moonless night could see no more than the painted eyes aside the boat's blind prow. By daybreak his dark face was gray with weariness, and he was so cramped with cold that he could scarcely stretch out to rest. He said, whispering, "Hold the mage wind from the west, Asterial," and then he slept. There was no sunrise, and presently rain came beating across the bow from the northeast. It was no storm, only the long, cold winds and rains of winter. Soon all things in the open boat were wet through, despite the sailcloth cover they had bought, and Vetch felt as if he too were soaked clear to the bone, and Ged shivered in his sleep. It's fucking Gladiator over here with the cats. In pity for his friend, and perhaps for himself, Vetch tried to turn aside for a little that rude ceaseless wind that bore the rain. But though, following Ged's will, he could keep the mage wind strong and steady, his weather-working had small power here so far from land, and the wind of the open sea did not listen to his voice. And at this a certain fear came into Vetch, as he began to wonder how much wizardly power would be left to him and Ged if they went on and on away from the lands where men were meant to live. Ged watched again that night, and all night held the boat eastward. When day came, the world's wind slackened somewhat, and the sun shone fitfully. But the great swells ran so high that Lookfar must tilt and climb up them as if they were hills, and hang at the hill crest and plunge suddenly, and climb up the next again, and the next, unending. In the evening of that day, Vetch spoke out of long silence. "My friend," he said, "you spoke once as if sure we would come to land at last. I would not question your vision but for this, that it might be a trick, a deception made by that which you follow, to lure you on farther than a man can go over ocean. For our power may change and weaken on strange seas, and a shadow does not tire or starve or drown." They sat side by side on the thwart, yet Ged looked at him now as if from a distance across a wide abyss. His eyes were troubled, and he was slow to answer. At last he said, "Asterial, we are coming near." Hearing his words, his friend knew them to be true. He was afraid then, but he put his hand on Ged's shoulder and said only, "Well then, good, that is good." Again that night Ged watched, for he could not sleep in the dark, nor would he sleep when the third day came. Still they ran with that ceaseless, light, terrible swiftness over the sea, and Vetch wondered at Ged's power that could hold so strong a mage wind hour after hour, here on the open sea where Vetch felt his own power all weakened and astray. And they went on until it seemed to Vetch that what Ged had spoken would come true. And they were going beyond the sources of the sea and eastward behind the gates of daylight. Ged stayed forward in the boat, looking ahead as always, but he was not watching the ocean now, or not the ocean that Vetch saw, a waste of heaving water to the rim of the sky. In Ged's eyes there was a dark vision that overlapped and veiled the gray sea and the gray sky, and the darkness grew, and the veil thickened. None of this was visible to Vetch, except when he looked at his friend's face. Then he too saw the darkness for a moment. They went on, and it was as if, though one wind drove them in one boat, Vetch went east over the world's sea, while Ged went alone into a realm where there was no east or west, no rising or setting of the sun or of the stars. Ged stood up suddenly in the prow and spoke aloud. The mage wind dropped. Lookfar lost headway and rose and fell on the vast surges like a chip of wood. Though the world's wind blew strong as ever straight from the north now, the brown sail hung slack, unstirred. And so the boat hung on the waves, swung by their great slow swinging, but going no direction. Ged said, "Take down the sail," and Vetch did so quickly, while Ged unlashed the oars and set them in the locks and bent his back to rowing. Vetch, seeing only the waves heaving up and down clear to the end of sight, could not understand why they went now by oars, but he waited, and presently he was aware that the world's wind was growing faint and the swells diminishing. The climb and plunge of the boat grew less and less. till at last she seemed to go forward under Ged's strong oar strokes over water that lay almost still as in a landlocked bay. And though Vetch could not see what Ged saw, when between his strokes he looked over and again over his shoulder at what lay before the boat's way, though Vetch could not see the dark slopes beneath unmoving stars, yet he began to see with his wizard's eye a darkness that welled up in the hollows of the waves all around the boat, and he saw the billows grow low and sluggish as they were choked with sand. If this were an enchantment of illusion, it was powerful beyond belief to make the open sea seem land. Trying to collect his wits and courage, Vetch spoke the revelation spell, watching between each slow-syllabled word for change or tremor of illusion in this strange drying and shallowing of the abyss of ocean. But there was none. Perhaps the spell, though it should affect only his vision and not the magic at work about them, had no power here. Or perhaps there was no illusion, and they had come to world's end. Unheeding, Ged rowed always slower, looking over his shoulder, choosing a way among channels or shoals and shallows that he alone could see. The boat shuddered as her keel dragged. Under that keel lay the vast deeps of the sea, yet they were aground. Ged drew the oars up rattling in their locks, and that noise was terrible, for there was no other sound. All sounds of water, wind, wood, sail were gone, lost in a huge, profound silence that might have been unbroken forever. The boat lay motionless. No breath of wind moved. The sea had turned to sand, shadowy, unstirred. Nothing moved in the dark sky or on that dry, unreal ground that went on into gathering darkness all around the boat as far as eye could see. Ged stood up and took his staff and lightly stepped over the side of the boat. Vetch thought to see him fall and sink down into the sea that surely was there behind this dry, dim veil that hid away water, sky, and light. But there was no sea anymore. Ged walked away from the boat. The dark sand showed his footprints where he went and whispered a little under his step. Well, yeah. Yeah, my cough is trying to get weird because I'm pushing 2 hours. I don't know what the limit really is for straight reading in a dramatic voice like this for long stretches. I guess probably about 2 hours. Hey, Alamo City Cello. Thank you. I have read for, I think once reading to Tay, my ex-girlfriend, I read for like 12, 14 hours straight, but I took breaks. Like, we were on drugs, if you can imagine that. It was a long time ago. It was 1996, I think. She tried to make me read Little Big by John Crowley all in one sitting. It's like a 500-page novel. I did get like 2/3 of the way in. I've never wanted to read that book again. The dark sand showed his footprints where he went and whispered a little under his step. His staff began to shine, not with the weir light, but with a clear white glow that soon grew so bright that it reddened his fingers where they held the radiant wood. He strode forward, away from the boat, but in no direction. There were no directions here, no north or south or east or west, only towards and away. To Vetch, watching, the light he bore seemed like a great slow star that moved through the darkness. And the darkness about it thickened, blackened, drew together. This also Ged saw, watching always ahead through the light. And after a while he saw at the faint outermost edge of the light a shadow that came towards him over the sand. At first it was shapeless, but as it drew nearer it took on the look of a man. An old man, it seemed, gray and grim, coming towards Ged. But even as Ged saw his father the smith in that figure, he saw that it was not an old man, but a young one. It was Jasper. Jasper's insolent, handsome young face and silver-clasped gray cloak and stiff stride. Hateful was the look he fixed on Ged across the dark intervening air. Ged did not stop, but slowed his pace, and as he went forward he raised his staff up a little higher. It brightened, and in its light the look of Jasper fell from the figure that approached, and it became Petchfairy. But Petchfairy's face was all bloated and pallid like the face of a drowned man, and he reached out his hand strangely, as if beckoning. Still Ged did not stop, but went forward, though there were only a few yards left between them now. Then the thing that faced him changed utterly, spreading out to either side as if it opened enormous thin wings, and it writhed and swelled and shrank again. Ged saw in it for an instant Skior's white face, and then a pair of clouded, staring eyes, and then suddenly a fearful face he did not know, man or monster, with writhing lips and eyes that were like pits going back into black emptiness. Yeah, my lungs are complaining of all the breathing, which I'm sure is good for me, the way that my lungs are complaining. It's been a while since I mentioned it, but I started doing these long reading streams in part to fight the weird black mold in my lungs from 3 years ago. It's still, I mean, you can hear it, that weird sort of leathery gravel. It's not just smoking. At that Ged lifted up the staff high, and the radiance of it brightened intolerably, burning with so white and great a light that it compelled and harrowed even that ancient darkness. In that light all form of man sloughed off the thing that came towards Ged. It drew together and shrank and blackened, crawling on 4 short taloned legs upon the sand. But still it came forward, lifting up to him a blind, unformed snout without lips or ears or eyes. As they came right together, it became utterly black in the white mage radiance that burned about it, and it heaved itself upright. In silence, man and shadow met face to face and stopped. Aloud and clearly, breaking that old silence, Ged spoke the shadow's name, and in the same moment the shadow spoke without lips or tongue, saying the same word, Ged. And the 2 voices were one voice. Ged reached out his hands, dropping his staff, and took hold of his shadow, of the black self that reached out to him. Light and darkness met and joined and were one. But to Vetch, watching in terror through the dark twilight from far off over the sand, it seemed that Ged was overcome, for he saw the clear radiance fail and grow dim. Rage and despair filled him, and he sprang out on the sand to help his friend or die with him, and ran towards that small fading glimmer of light in the empty dusk of the dry land. But as he ran, the sand sank under his feet, and he struggled in it as in quicksand, as through a heavy flow of water, until with a roar of noise and a glory of daylight and the bitter cold of winter and the bitter taste of salt, the world was restored to him, and he floundered in the sudden, true, and living sea. Nearby, the boat rocked on the gray waves, empty. Vetch could see nothing else on the water. The battering wave tops filled his eyes and blinded him. No strong swimmer, he struggled as best he could to the boat and pulled himself up into her. Coughing and trying to wipe away the water that streamed from his hair, he looked about desperately, not knowing which way to look. And at last he made out something dark among the waves, a long way off across what had been sound and now was wild water. Then he leaped to the oars and rowed mightily to his friend, and catching Ged's arms, helped and hauled him up over the side. Ged was dazed, and his eyes stared as if they saw nothing, but there was no hurt to be seen on him. His staff, black yew wood, all radiance quenched, was grasped in his right hand, and he would not let go of it. He said no word. Spent and soaked and shaking, he lay huddled up against the mast, never looking at Vetch, who raised the sail and turned the boat to catch the northeast wind. He saw nothing of the world until, straight ahead of their course, in the sky that darkened where the sun had set, between long clouds in a bay of clear blue light, the new moon shone, a ring of ivory, a rim of horn, reflected sunlight shining across the ocean of the dark. Ged lifted his face and gazed at that remote bright crescent in the west. He gazed for a long time, and then he stood up erect, holding his staff in his 2 hands as a warrior holds his long sword. He looked about at the sky, the sea, the brown swelling still above him, his friend's face. Oh, the brown swelling sail above him. Sorry. Asterial, he said, look, it is done. It is over. He laughed. The wound is healed, he said. I am whole. I am free. Then he bent over and hid his face in his arms, weeping like a boy. Until that moment, Vetch had watched him with an anxious dread, for he was not sure what had happened there in the dark land. He did not know if this was Ged in the boat with him, and his hand had been for hours ready to the anchor to stave in the boat's planking and sink her there in mid-sea, rather than carry back to the harbors of Earthsea the evil thing that he feared might have taken Ged's look and form. Now when he saw his friend and heard him speak, his doubt vanished, and he began to see the truth, that Ged had neither lost nor won, but, naming the shadow of his death with his own name, had made himself whole, a man who, knowing his whole true self, cannot be used or possessed by any power other than himself, and whose life, therefore, is lived for life's sake, and never in the service of ruin or pain or hatred or the dark. In the creation of Ea, which is the oldest song, it is said, only in silence the word, only in dark the light, only in dying life, bright the hawk's flight on the empty sky. That song Vetch sang aloud now as he held the boat westward, going before the cold wind of the winter night that blew at their backs from the vastness of the open sea. 8 days they sailed, and 8 again before they came in sight of land. Many times they had to refill their waterskin with spell-sweetened water of the sea, and they fished, but even when they called out fishermen's charms, they caught very little, for the fish of the open sea do not know their own names and pay no heed to magic. When they had nothing left to eat but a few scraps of smoked meat, Ged remembered what Yarrow had said when he stole the cake from the hearth, that he would regret his theft when he came to hunger on the sea. But hungry as he was, the remembrance pleased him, for she had also said that he, with her brother, would come home again. The mage wind had borne them for only 3 days eastward, yet 16 days they sailed westward to return. No men have ever returned from so far out on the open sea as did the young wizards Astariel and Ged in the fallows of winter in their open fishing boat. They met no great storms, and steered steadily enough by the compass and by the star Talbegrin, taking a course somewhat northward of their outbound way. Thus they did not come back to Astowell, but passing by Fartoli and Sneg without sighting them, first raised land off the southernmost cape of Coppish. Over the waves they saw cliffs of stone rise like a great fortress. Seabirds cried wheeling over the breakers, and smoke of the hearth fires of small villages drifted blue on the wind. From there the voyage to Ifish was not long. They came into Ismay harbor on a still dark evening, before snow. They tied up the boat Lookfar, that had borne them to the coasts of Death's kingdom and back, and went up through the narrow streets to the wizard's house. Their hearts were very light as they entered into the firelight and warmth under that roof, and Yarrow ran to meet them, crying with joy. And there's a little postscript. If Astariel of Ifish kept his promise and made a song of that first great deed of Ged's, it has been lost. There is a tale told in the east reach of a boat that ran aground, days out from any shore, over the abyss of ocean. In Ifish they say it was Astariel who sailed that boat, but in Tope they say it was 2 fishermen blown by a storm far out on the open sea. And in Halp the tale is of a Halpish fisherman, and tells that he could not move his boat from the unseen sands it grounded on, and so wanders there yet. So of the song of the shadow there remain only a few scraps of legend, carried like driftwood from isle to isle over the long years. But in the deed of Ged nothing is told of that voyage, nor of Ged's meeting with the shadow, before ever he sailed the dragon's run unscathed, or brought back the ring of Erth Akpi from the tombs of Atuan to Havnor, or came at last to Roke once more, as Archmage of all the islands of the world. The end. That makes me want to read the sequels, but I didn't like them when I was a kid. Okay, so there's at least 2 more Earthsea books I haven't read. There's one called Tehanu, the Last Book of Earthsea, that's listed here. And I know she published a collection of short stories. I don't think that's Tehanu. I think that's a different one. Which would make sense, because that's an awful lot of world building to put into just 3 brief novels. I don't think the 3 Earthsea novels together are the length of Fellowship of the Ring. They're all pretty short. All right, guys. I'm tired and I'm hungry. I'm going to go eat something. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a great pleasure to read you this entire novel. I don't know what I'm the other novels I have to read here are all also classic adult fantasy. Um, but I'm gonna revert to short stories for the next few days. Uh, and I am afraid I'm not gonna have enough grocery money, which means I will run out of mushroom gummies, and that means I may not be in here for actually the chat streams I'll have to give up before the reading streams. I can be pretty depressed and do this, but hopefully I'll make it. They better not. They better not tell me I can't have this new job or I'm gonna freak out. They were supposed to call it a day. All right. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. You guys are the very best. Thank you.